Hey folks, we are back with Cognitive Distortions. Aaron, why did we resurrect this book?
This whole podcast is based off of this book called CBT Workbook by Henry Emerson. We brought it back because right now we are talking about the temperaments in the academy. And so I remember reading through this and being like, I can really see some of the different temperaments showing up in these cognitive distortions. And so that's what we're going to be talking about today.
So Aaron's going to be quizzing me a little bit, reading little nuggets from this book, and then I'm going to say, okay, like how's the temperament show up perhaps with this cognitive distortion? You're going to learn a little bit more about your temperaments, a little bit more about the way you might be thinking, a little bit more about where you might even be buying into some of these cognitive distortions.
Which are really just lies.
My mouth was a little distorted there.
Or fallacies.
So. All right, so we'll see you in there. A lot of fun.
Hi, guys.
Nice.
Our dog got sprayed by a skunk like a month ago. And every time she gets wet now, and it was a little rainy this morning, she smells like a skunk still.
It's bad.
It is so bad. And she's laying right over there. I'm like, oh.
Everybody has smelled a skunk before, like on the highway, or like you walk out of your house and you're like, oh man, a skunk must have like sprayed a mile from here, something like that. When it is in your house, it is pandemonium, panic.
And it smells everywhere.
My mind was a mess.
Every like stagnant air spot, like closets or something like that. I can't believe it just got into.
I can't, but like it was a traumatic event when that dog came in the house. Because at first I knew that she chased after something outside. It was late at night, you guys, and she comes back to the door, and I'm just like, oh man, I kind of caught a little bit of a whiff of a skunk, and I was like, oh Lord, please, please. And I opened the door and I went, didn't smell anything. And so I let her in the house.
Yes, first mistake.
First mistake there. And she got inside, and when I tell you, the stench filled up the whole house, the entire house, in a matter of probably 30 seconds.
Yes.
There was no relief. Even immediately outside of our house, still no relief. There was just this bubble, this cloud, and there was no wind that night.
Yeah.
It's
a bummer.
It was just, it just overtook. And then I did, second mistake, I put her in the shower.
Which, don't do it.
Don't do that. Don't do it. It sets the smell. Keep the dog out of the house, and then there's a whole hydrogen peroxide and baking soda and Dawn dish soap.
Mix.
Save the ducks from the oil spill. Saves the dog from the skunk smell as well.
And your house.
But it took a couple of days. Lots of candles.
No, I mean, our shower still smells like it. It's just like ground zero.
That was ground zero. Yeah. The place where we clean ourselves out now actually is the smelliest place in the house.
Yeah. So
y'all want to come visit now, don't you?
Hopefully our suggestions to you will help you. I wish this upon no one, but if your dog ever gets sprayed, leave him outside and make that paste. You can find it on Pinterest.
But I would say, to tie into what we're going to be talking about today, the most painful part of the experience was my catastrophic thinking, my catastrophizing. All right, we're going to be coming back to this book we talked about in the past on the lies we wish were true.
The
right?
CBT Workbook, that stands for Cognitive Behavioral Therapy. If you guys haven't picked up on this, we are cognitive behavioral coaches. We are not therapists. We've never claimed to be therapists. But we use a lot of these techniques in the coaching realm. And so we're going to be talking about cognitive distortions. We have a whole podcast on this.
Yep, the lies we wish were true is
yes.
that one. I don't know what episode it is.
Thank you for remembering. That's awesome. But right now, we are currently in our academy. If you haven't joined our academy, what are you waiting for?
Yeah, get in there. Come on, let's do it.
But we're talking about the 4 temperaments. We actually created a temperaments test and this kick butt temperaments report.
Yeah,
I want to say kick butt because I did most of it, but no, I'm just kidding. We actually had a whole team helping, but like, it's just a really cool report. And so you want to go check that out. If you, can we put the link to that test in this, under this?
In the show notes that we never populate? Yes, we can do that. It'll be there.
If not, you can always go to our website and find it there.
Special shout out to Bryant Morin on this.
Yes.
Bryant was the engineer behind the scenes
Yes.
with this, and it is just it is
He
out there. So
saved
take
the day.
it, get it. You can take it for free and get your results, or you can pay a small fee and get the actual report that has a lot of great things in there, like common vices, common virtues. We're drawing from a lot of the literature that's out there. Even like the temperaments are very compatible with the Catholic faith, right?
Well,
or
yeah.
they've been used.
Yes, Catholic
A lot.
authors
There's a lot of
and
great
writers.
authors. The temperament God gave you, the temperament
Teachers.
God gave your spouse. The Bennetts have written a lot on this.
Well, I mean, in Jordan Amen, in his
Spiritual
book
Theology.
Spiritual Theology, there's
Yep.
a whole section on the temperaments. Father Chad Ripperger, in his psychology book, he does a whole section on the temperaments, and so it does have like a Catholic background in it. It's one of the oldest personality tests. In the world.
Yeah.
On the world.
On the whole world. The oldest on the world.
Anyway,
Grover showed up.
it would be so cool if I just learned how to talk. So cognitive distortions, what do they have to do with the temperaments?
Yeah, we kind of want to do a little tie-in here to make it fun.
This is why we're talking about the temperaments and cognitive distortions. So this connection that we're making is, I started reading through this book again, and I'm started seeing some mental habits of the temperaments, partially because I was writing the report and I was just temperament focused,
Reticular activating system.
I was picking up so many things. I'm that's the sanguine, that's the choleric. And so in reading this book again, I started seeing some of the similarities. So we're going to dive in.
We're going to read the entire book to you.
We're just going to read
Metanoia book club.
the cognitive distortions, and I'm going to read a brief little description of them, and then Matt is going to guess which temperament.
Ooh, this is going to be fun.
We're going to have a game.
Such a
about it.
sanguine approach to this.
Yes.
And I love looking over at the book. It's written in this very big print. It's kind of like looking at your mom's phone when she's text messaging. You're like,
Yes.
wow, boy.
I feel
maybe
like we're
time
a
for some
little
glasses.
off balance. Can you come over a little bit this way?
No, I can scoot.
Yeah, you're all the way over
All
there.
right, here we go.
Okay.
I love it when she wants me to be a little bit closer.
Okay, so what is a cognitive distortion? It is, psychology refers to as thoughts, or I would say even patterns of thoughts, that cause individuals to inaccurately perceive reality.
You believe lies. Cognitive distortions are lies, ultimately at the root.
You're
Is that fair?
inaccurately perceiving reality. Yes. That's a really fancy way of saying you're believing lies.
Yes.
Dummy, stop believing lies.
Secular books, they just don't get to the point.
I know.
It's just
right?
well, we can't say lies because that implies that something's true. And we can't say true because that's just inconvenient for my life
Right.
and my choices.
Right. But not
my
only do they
Twitter page.
do they make you inaccurately perceive reality, but you also, it reinforces negative thought patterns and emotions.
So I love it. It implies that there is a reality.
Yeah, I know. It's so funny. So
Sounds
if you
a lot
guys
like
think about
objective
truth, actually, truth has a couple different layers to it. It's the first layer is aligned with natural law and reality. So we can say something is factual or something is true because it's aligned with reality. And so, but that's not where truth ends. Truth keeps going. In our Catholic faith, it's then there's divinely revealed truth. There's the fullness of truth. So it goes up and up and up. But the basis that we need to continue to work upon, even if we're talking to people who may not believe that there's absolute truth, we could maybe speak to them and be yeah, but can we at least
Agree
relate-
on natural law, natural truth.
or natural truth,
Yes.
2 + 2 = 4. Unfortunately, our world is kind of starting to forget that as well. So
That's a tough one.
it is tough, but anyway, when you're talking about truth, maybe start there. Okay. So cognitive distortion number 1.
All right, I'm not peeking at your answers.
Okay. Matt,
She has no
this type
answers.
of distortion refers to the way an individual focuses solely on negative elements of a situation and ignoring the positive ones. Who does that sound like?
Not a sanguine, first of all.
Sanguine has the opposite cognitive distortion?
Are these all going to be melancholic?
I think so.
I think the answer is melancholic. It sounds quite melancholic to kind of dwell on the negative. Yeah. Melancholic has kind of that natural disposition towards sorrow, right? Which is resting in that place of evil, right? Which is focusing on the negative. So yeah, I my answer is melancholic on that.
How would you coach somebody who has this? Like if somebody's like, they're just like focusing on the negative, like really quick, like what would you at least let them know or teach them?
I'd really want to encourage them to kind of look for other evidence. All right. And so it's, or even encourage them to that there may even be other evidence out there to the contrary, right? So at least starts to expand their focus to kind of take in some more data. Because the melancholic is also they're very intellective also. So they can think through things but they can ruminate and they can kind of, they can spiral and go down a rabbit hole and tend to even, go soda straw with their viewpoint. So expanding to take in more evidence might be a strategy that I'd use here. How about you, Aaron?
I think I would try to show them. I mean, I love that saying, what you focus on expands and what you look for, you find. And so when you have this type of lens towards something, like you're going to continue to find negativity. But I always want to know why. Like, why are we looking for that? Like, what's in it? Like, what's in it for you to keep looking for this and identify what that is?
Yeah. What's the motivation? What's the payoff?
And it might be self-protection. It might be like, oh, if I see this ahead of time, then I can protect myself. But to even show how that's not really happening. You know what I mean? Like how you aren't really protecting yourself. You're just making your sadness expand.
Well, yeah, oftentimes, like if I'm looking for a solution when I kind of go down this path. And so in order to find the solution, I want to understand the problem first. Well, if I'm understanding the problem, I'm looking naturally at the negative things, but I can kind of, where it stops being helpful to define the problem is when it's just like, it goes to a place of despair. Or it's just like, oh man, like there's no out. It's so terrible. And it's like, and it just zaps the energy to the point where it's just like, all right, the world's ending. The sky's falling.
Yeah.
At this point.
Yeah. I'm
it
always
starts
like,
to how into some other cognitive.
but I'm also
distortions
like how is that even useful? Like, how do you want to really spend your mental energy? But that's also like my sanguine side.
Well, it's that melancholic. Melancholic is often, even when I bring in kind of the Clifton strengths, I'm starting to see some trends where melancholic also has some dominant strategic thinking.
Yes.
Themes. So intellection, I think, could be one of those, or like intellection, where the drive there is to really understand. And so the motivation a lot of the time is understanding, to really have this knowledge.
That's interesting because I also know that melancholics are idea oriented.
Okay.
They are, meaning they understand, they go look for more information, more ideas, and they may tend towards focusing on the negative ideas. But what you could do is say, but what else is there? I really like what you were saying, like kind of like equal airtime. Like what other ideas could we also maybe look at for a second? And I like using this technique with some of my melancholic clients when it's like they just feel so attached to a thought or an idea or a negative thought, and I go, let's just play for like 30 seconds.
So sanguine.
And then we can go back to your terrible, awful thought after the 30 seconds. I promise you, we can go back. But like for these 30 seconds, I'll time it. Let's just play in this area where this also could be true.
That's actually helpful because oftentimes a melancholic, and I find this in myself, like kind of want to stay there. There's like a comfort to it. There's a familiarity to it, as unpleasant as it may be. Kind of want to stay there. And so like the permission to kind of just journey out of it, but knowing that you have permission to go back to it is, I like that technique.
Well, and I also don't ever have them go to the opposite extreme. Because I don't think they're ready for that. So it's like, let's just play where the opposite is true.
Pollyanna-ish.
Yeah.
Yes.
And melancholics do not like that. No. But I'll go, what else could be true here?
Yeah.
Like maybe it's not the opposite, but like what else is accurate? Like let's give that some airtime.
Okay. That was good. Let's do another one.
Okay. So this next one And it might come up as melancholic to all of these, but like what other ones can you see? So
Okay.
here, let me just see.
Seeing the lens through my choleric melancholic world.
Okay. This is called splitting or black and white thinking. Oh, by the way, who wrote this book? Henry Emerson. It's called the CBT Workbook.
Oh, Henry, thank you.
To everybody out there who is wondering. Okay, splitting or black and white thinking, black and white thinking is a cognitive distortion where an individual evaluates the self in extreme terms. It does not leave any room for nuance or complexity because everything is either black or white or never has shades of gray.
Okay, so I'm thinking back even to our report, and it's just like melancholic, black and white thinking, right? There's kind of that tendency towards perfection, which likes to have clear, doesn't really like gray areas, because gray areas are like, where do I go? Which one's the perfect way? Which is the best way? It's really unclear at that point. And so eradication of mystery is often a goal.
I think
You're saying
also the
motivation.
choleric.
Choleric is
Yeah.
in there too, right?
Like, I'm right and you're wrong.
I'm right and I'm cooler.
Matt had a roommate who used to say that to him. I'm right and I'm cooler.
I'm right and I'm cooler. That was Burke, actually.
Talk about
Fact
an
check.
association. Oh, yeah. Right. Like being right means cooler.
The world
Such a
famous
choleric
Burke.
way of being. So, yeah, I see the choleric, and that shows up in kind of like there's only one way. I always think of like Trump as like the greatest caricature of a choleric. Like, it is the best way. I can't do a Trump. I'm like,
Oh, I can't. No, I'm thinking like I can do a better Trump, and it's just like it's the greatest. It's the greatest. I'm gonna stop. It's the best. Yeah, it's.
I'm gonna build a wall, and it's gonna be the best wall.
That was pretty good. I liked it.
Very much a caricature. Not very good, but not very good impression. What I mean. So it's really like, yeah, there's no areas of gray here. I think that's very much. I don't think I deal with the black or white thinking.
Okay.
Maybe sometimes I do. Maybe my secondary, my choleric comes out, but
Enjoy
like
the mystery.
I remember always having arguments with my friend who was very much a black or white thinker, and she was like, "There is no gray," and I'm like, "What? Are you kidding me? Life is like shades of gray."
That's such a gray
That's a terrible
thing to say.
Actually.
That's debatable.
Do not read that book.
It's in the Bible.
Yeah.
Okay.
But yes, no, there's so many nuances in life, and so anyway, I can't really relate to that one.
Okay.
I can relate to this one though.
Hint.
This one's called overgeneralizing or overgeneralization. And this is a common form. It involves taking a separate incident, a particular, if you will, and using it as a piece of evidence to make a conclusion. So it's like, I took one test one time and I was really bad at it. And now forever and always, I will be a terrible test taker.
You've never said that.
Never.
I'm a bad test taker.
Yes. I think this is sanguine. This is very much an overgeneralization. Like I have so much evidence, and then there's like one.
Well, yeah, it's like the thought.
Situation.
Yeah, the thought is like it just goes quick to, rather than reason, it jumps quickly to an emotion, and then the emotion carries off. So
maybe the
Universal.
maybe the overgeneralization kind of comes after the emotion here. I think it's kind of like, I feel bad and disappointed, and sanguines hate to feel like sad or anything like that, and so they're like, they want to make a conclusion to maybe get out of it a little bit. I don't know. Like they want to make a conclusion.
Oh, I just got a whiff of the skunk. Okay. Man, it just punches you in the face when you least expect it.
She's sitting over here.
I know.
So they want to make a quick conclusion to maybe get out of that negative emotion. So they make this generalization like, I'm just bad at taking tests. So I know I'll just avoid taking tests for the rest of my life.
Yeah. Eventually, okay. So I can see that where if it's serving the sanguine and avoiding a future negative experience, then or unpleasant experience, I think is a better way to put it. Yeah, I can see that. But here's the thing: I kind of the hope, the silver lining, not sanguine, but silver lining that I see with this. This tendency to overgeneralize, to find universals. I think it speaks to this hardwiring that we have as human beings to actually seek universal truth. We want to know a universal truth. And we know that particular circumstances, particular situations are kind of a way for us making that ascent to a universal truth.
Yes.
And we want to rest in that universal truth. The problem is when we're maybe showing up a little bit intellectually lazy, perhaps, and we're getting there too quickly, and in so doing, we're like making ourselves the arbiter of what is true, rather than being a student of it. Even if in places where there might be some mystery, like it's really difficult to, say this is black and white, because there are black and whites. But those gray areas, when people just don't want to stay in that gray area because it's uncomfortable, they end up, just to avoid the discomfort of the mystery, they might overgeneralize at that point.
Yeah.
It's how heresies show up too,
Well,
by
I
the way.
would say so I could also see the phlegmatic in that.
Yeah. Yep.
Where I think they have different motivations. So, by the way, if you guys haven't heard our other podcasts on the temperaments, we recommend you go back to them, because we are operating out of these assumptions of that you already know what each of these temperaments are and their tendencies. So go back and listen to those. We had a 5-part series in the podcast. However, I think the sanguine and the phlegmatic have two different motivations. So the sanguine is the motivation is to get out of that negative situation, or get out of that negative feeling as quick as possible. I know I'll make a conclusion and then therefore never put myself in this position again. And the phlegmatic, though, the phlegmatic really is motivated by constancy, like being consistent with things.
Controlling their environment.
Yeah, trying to not kind of rock the boat with people, because that kind of creates a disharmony, if you will. So in this case, they also tend towards sloth and apathy. So in this case, it's you want to make this, there's maybe a tendency to make this overgeneralization based off of one or two instances, so that you don't maybe overexert yourself. And not get a result that is maybe scary or new or inconstant.
Yeah, so I can see the motivation behind overgeneralization here in the phlegmatic being, okay, I want to, I saw in the past where in these circumstances, these particulars over here, it kind of rocked the boat a little bit. Rocking the boat is bad. And so we're just going to avoid, we're going to overgeneralize. And anything that looks, smells like these circumstances over here, we're just going to avoid it, because it rocks the boat, and rocking the boat is bad.
Yes. So how would you coach somebody with this?
With overgeneralization. Okay. I think it's looking to other evidence, and just really exploring. I love that question. Is that 100% true all the time?
Yeah.
Because that starts to really engages the mind to consider, is this really, is it really a universal truth? I like to stay out of the emotion, really kind of go cognitive in the coaching here, and stay out of the emotion, because it's that emotional response that is
that can keep us in the distortion.
Yeah, it's
actually.
overriding,
Yeah.
right? And I think perhaps even in these distortions we can see consistently. I don't know if it's true, but here's a thought, Aaron. You've read more of the book than I have. That in each of these cases we have our intellect actually being subjected to our emotions, the emotion that we're feeling,
maybe.
and then we're using the intellect to justify our emotions.
Yeah, that's interesting. I don't know. I can't really answer that, but. And also what I want to mention here is a little brief word on emotions and what we're saying and what we're not saying.
Okay.
Emotions are not bad.
Never. They are never bad.
They are, in our catechism, it says that emotions or passions are morally neutral. They become vicious when they become excess or deficit, or they lead us to, sinful actions.
A place of vice or
Yeah.
something. Yeah.
So when we say emotions, in this case, they become cognitive distortions. And when we're in the emotion, we can't cognitively think straight. And so we're not saying these things are terrible or whatever, but I mean, if they are actually creating cognitive distortions,
They're
chances
terrible.
are they are, or around cognitive distortions, or like the result of a cognitive distortion. Yeah, it probably is one of those emotions that you need to pause and go, okay, maybe I shouldn't let this be in the driver's seat. Right?
Yep.
We are also really big on saying, like, let's discern our emotions. Let's actually, like, is this an appropriate emotion? Is feeling sad after your mom dies, is that a normal emotion? I would say yes, and that is appropriate emotion, and we need to process that with Jesus. Like, you need to bring him into this processing situation. We have other podcasts on that, but I just wanted to stop and say that because I think you hear this in the Catholic world, and a lot of people will immediately go to emotions are bad or evil. I'm like,
Or
no.
judgment, snap judgments, which
Yeah.
is an overgeneralization on an emotion.
Yes, but I want to say they are morally neutral, but we can actually get a lot of information out of them and gauge them by stopping and pausing and looking what they are. Okay. So we just did that one.
What's next, Aaron? What do we got?
Don't look.
Not peeking. It's not like you have notes in those things. Actually, she's got quite a bit of notes.
Catastrophizing.
Definition,
So
please.
there's
I have a
actually-
definition.
There's actually two ways you can do this. It's called magnifying or minimizing.
Mm-hmm.
So someone who has this tendency often expects that the worst will happen or has happened, and oftentimes based on an event that isn't as serious as believed. So that's like the maximizing.
Okay.
Okay. So they're like making a mountain out of a molehill.
I want to go sanguine on this.
Okay. Catastrophizing also
Or choleric.
is minimizing good experiences or positive aspects of an experience. So that's
Kind of phlegmatic.
it's a little bit like mental filtering of the melancholic. But okay, so tell me why sanguine.
Well, I think sanguine and
Or
choleric
choleric.
because they are both very reactive to a
Yes.
stimulus. So they react big and fast. So
Yes.
often suspends quite a bit of understanding and judgment in the process. They're just in it, and but then they need kind of a cool off time. The sanguines kind of moves past it, but I don't know if the sanguine moves past it because they're gaining an understanding of the situation. They just kind of move on.
Yeah.
Like they find something else. Choleric will stew a little bit on it, a little bit more. So my choleric melancholic, which I can react fast, and then I can also hold on to things and stew. And then over time, it's just like that little kind of grass fire turns into a raging California forest fire. Yeah, that is, yeah. So I can even see a little bit of melancholic on there with catastrophizing, right?
Oh yeah, for sure.
I often,
The worst will happen or has happened.
and part of
Yeah.
this, I think, is even my military training because you're going out on a mission. You are turning the map around, and you're looking at the battlefield from the perspective of the enemy. It's like, okay, what could the enemy do? What's like the worst case scenario that I could deal with, so that I know when I'm in that worst case scenario, I either need to like turn back or I need to bring something else. And so it kind of lends itself well to that wargaming. But when it's not really a life or death situation, it can get a little bit excessive.
Well, I think that's
and
interesting
indulgent.
because what you just said made me think there's a difference between worry and strategy.
Okay.
So
Tell me
like,
more.
so staying in this catastrophizing place where you're just like, you know, like only finding the negative, or this could happen. That's worrying. That's just like staying in that indulgent action of worrying, continuing to worry. And in that case, I mean, I would say you could take this cognitive distortion and utilize it to your benefit by making a strategy out of it. But then also deciding with your free will and saying like, okay, and beyond this, once I've created a strategy, a plan A and plan B, I'm not going to worry about it anymore.
I think that's good because anxiety, like the formula for anxiety, folks, you may have heard us say this in the past, is a sentence that sounds like this. What if, and then insert possible evil, regardless of how improbable it is. But what if, you know,
Blank happens.
the enemy has like sharks with laser beams around their head, like strapped to their head.
Land
like,
sharks.
Land sharks. what if a Sharknado shows up in this situation? Highly improbable, but nonetheless will still start that worry response. And if I'm going into an assault and I'm looking at the worst possible situation, which may not even be probable, arguably, I'm not even going to step across the line of departure at that point, because what if the enemy has something that is like has a Sharknado or can control the weather, or like has even something that chances are they just don't have, or it's far beyond their capabilities to be able to have. But we do this. I can do this on, with relationships.
But also,
and
if you
things
think
like
about the strength from Clifton's Strengths strategy, they also ask what if.
Yes, what if, and they look at options.
Yes.
They're very quick at identifying options. And
So really, like how I would coach somebody is like, instead of saying what if insert, perceived future evil, say what if we could try it this way? What if we could do this? Like what if we could create this? What if this isn't a problem? I mean, what if you just started asking better what if questions?
I like that. Even opening up the possibility that this evil isn't a definite, this perceived evil is not an absolute, like it's there. Because the funny thing is when we're thinking about it, whether it's upon us or not, it's upon us.
Yeah, because we're thinking
in reality, it's
yeah.
upon us. Right? It's very present to
Yes.
us in that moment, and the anxiety is fixing us in that moment, even though it's not really. The Sharknado is not even there.
That's like so fascinating to me.
I
Yeah.
know.
So, and it's all a choice, which is like so incredible.
Yeah, and that could be like depressing for some people, but like think of that switched on, like with putting your mind towards heaven. It's like, oh wow, I can experience something,
taste of it.
very like a foretaste of heaven in
Yes.
my meditation. We see the contemplatives going that way, where they're getting a little foretaste of heaven. Love it.
Yep. Personalizing. This is someone who has this kind of thinking, believes that everything they do has a significant impact on people or events, which most of the time is very irrational. For instance, a person may think that their absence at work would result in bad things for the organization, and that things would be just fine if they were present. Isn't that interesting? Kind of like taking everything personally and being like, I can see a choleric here.
Okay.
I can also kind of see a phlegmatic, interestingly enough.
I can see the pride of the choleric showing up there.
Like
How's this office ever going to operate without me being here?
I'm so glad this is coming out of your mouth and not mine. But
So it's like,
Because I know that you're thinking it.
yeah, yeah. But but I could see also the phlegmatic is very much they are peacemakers. They want harmony, and there is this kind of overemphasis on when you want harmony so bad, when you're afraid that there might be disharmony, you might tend towards people pleasing, which is a
Okay.
subtle form of manipulation. Like it's kind of like, I want to please this person, not necessarily out of love, like selfless love for them, but I want to please this person so that peace comes out of this. So that peace, so like
I can feel at peace.
yeah, so that I can feel at peace. And so there is kind of this subtle form of manipulation, not calling you all manipulators or anything like that, but there is like this type of wanting to control group dynamics. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and even like the...
I'm sorry, and like tying into the personalizing.
Well, I'm hearing even responsibility show up in this one with the Clifton strength. So responsibility is a psychological ownership of a task, and it's great. They can be very dependable people, very diligent people, and but also like they can be very controlling or very reluctant to allow somebody else to step in and make a contribution. And so we're kind of describing a little bit of an overuse that's showing up here. But yeah, I hear a little bit of that in the personalization.
Yeah, the personalization, that connection between the people pleasing and the phlegmatic is like, if I'm not here to fix this or to create harmony, like, I don't know. There's something there. I don't know why I'm making this connection in my head. Have you seen the connection at
No,
all?
I'm not saying it. And we're both high connectedness, so I don't know what's going on. Maybe there is none.
Yes. Yes, I don't know. I think it's that sense of wanting to control like their outside
Environment.
Yes, environment.
Their environment.
I can't really see it. Never mind. Sorry, phlegmatics. But you learned a little bit about the phlegmatic thing right there.
With our overgeneralizations.
Yeah, I
of
totally
the
made it
temperaments.
overgeneralization. Anyway, okay.
Sorry to all you phlegmatics out there. Public service announcement.
Fallacy of change. This is thinking. Okay, so this thinking is rooted in the wrong belief that one's happiness in life depends on other people. In other words, this is a fallacy that is grounded in the idea that people must change as to suit the individual involved. So pretty much any temperament that has a manual for somebody and like how they think people should act, and because if they didn't act the way that they wanted them to, that they would feel something, that they would feel an emotion.
Mm-hmm. And what do you mean when you say manual?
A manual is just an expectation, like kind of these unspoken. Sorry, they're very much written in our heads, but they're unspoken, often rule books that we have for people. And we're like, you should act this way.
Yeah, and they're self-serving, even though they seem very pretty and like they're looking out for the other person. But ultimately, it's just like, okay, when you act a certain way, then I can feel a certain way. That's kind of what's going on behind the scenes with this. And that's just not true. Because where do our thoughts come from, Aaron? Or our feelings come from?
Our thoughts.
Well,
the reason why this is a cognitive distortion and very damaging is because in reality, other people are not responsible for our feelings. We are. What we're thinking actually is responsible for what we are feeling.
That is so liberating.
It is so liberating. So this
So
shows up
convicting
in
and
the
so
very,
liberating.
in like the different, I think the choleric may be like, can you hurry up so I don't have to feel as impatient, right? The sanguine, these are kind of caricatures, of course, overgeneralizations again, but like the sanguine might be like, can you not be so negative so I don't have to feel negative? The melancholic can be like, can you not be so joyful so I can stay negative, feeling negative? Just kidding.
Spoken like a true melancholic there. Not.
And the phlegmatic is like, can you not be so unpeaceful so I can feel peace?
I like everything you like.
All right. Fallacy of fairness.
Okay.
The fallacy of fairness involves the idea that the world one lives in must be fair at all times.
Phlegmatic.
It's somewhat having a sense of entitlement or the thinking that they know what is fair and feels resentful when they feel they or other people are not being treated fairly.
So I go phlegmatic on this one because I think I hear consistency, which is even a Clifton strength, that it's a very rule-based way of operating.
Or procedural.
Right? Yeah, it's very procedural, but it's just like everybody operates under the same rules. There's no exceptions for people. And we do this because it's the best way to guarantee a predictable result because it's consistent. There's no special treatment. And I think what's nice about that is it even can, when everybody is getting the same treatment, there's kind of like an emotional management that's going on there as well, right? I think of the scripture where it's like the landowner or the vineyard guy say, hey, come work in my vineyard. And he goes in the morning, afternoon, late in the evening. And so he's got people that are work there for the whole day, for half the day, and for like the last hour. And he gives them all the same treatment at the end of the day.
That one always made me mad.
I know, because we're like at the same
it's
time.
Definitely sanguine too.
Yeah, so perhaps that's, but like I see that being something where it's just like, all right, there's something very inconsistent about it. Maybe the phlegmatic would look at that scripture and be like, okay, well, whatever the manager says.
Yeah,
like,
I see way more melancholic in this one.
do you? Okay,
Yeah.
Tell me why.
Well, melancholic has a very strong sense of justice,
Okay.
which makes them highly compassionate to people too. Like they will be the first ones there being compassionate to somebody if they sense that somebody is like feeling like an injustice happened to them. You know, a lot of the people who probably run charities and just these types of organizations that like help the underprivileged or whatever, I would put all my money on our melancholics.
All your money?
A lot of it.
Okay.
Not our money, mine.
Okay.
Which is like $20 in my wallet.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, no. So I would actually say that's melancholic for sure. Anybody who has like a high sense of justice, like
Okay.
that's unjust and this is just.
I can see that.
But I do think it's like, I think how I would coach somebody on that is saying, how do we know for sure that this is just or this is unjust? And once again, like just really kind of challenge this belief that what is just.
Mm-hmm.
Because the other thing is that melancholics, even though they're very high intellect normally, they can be ruled a little bit by their emotions. And so like they can be moved into that place. Now, once again, guys, we want our emotions to be subordinate to our reason, not the other way around.
In order for that to happen, we have to get outside of our own head, which is a very comfortable living space for the melancholic. So if you're staying in your own head as a melancholic, you are cutting yourself off from, you're limiting your understanding of truth based on your own experience and what you know, which is not the fullness of it.
Yeah.
That may sting a little bit. Stings me to say it.
Anyway, okay.
Heads up, melancholics.
The next
This
one.
may sting a little.
The next one is control fallacy. I like this one. I like calling this one emotional childhood. We're not saying that to be mean or cutting or anything like that. It's just kind of this abdication of your emotional. So it's similar to the fallacy of change, where you're kind of handing over your emotional responsibility to somebody else. Like, they did this, and so I feel this way. But there's two types. There's two different beliefs within the control fallacy. So the first one involves feeling controlled by external forces, definitely the sanguine, for sure. This is the idea that one is only a victim of fate. For instance, an employee might say that the quality of his work is out of his control and would blame anyone or anything for not being able to deliver what was expected of him. So that's the first one, where in being like, I can't help it, it's out of control. It's like kind of this entitlement, kind of this blaming your circumstances tendency. I see that a lot in myself, even like the sanguine way of being, partially because they're hyper sensitive to their common sense power, meaning what they're taking in through their senses. And they can be very distracted by that. And so they can think, oh, what I'm taking in through my senses, my circumstances, things outside of me have control over me. They very easily go to that place.
Very reactive. I see sanguines often being, like you brought up, hypersensitive, highly sensitive people, right? They can take in a lot from their environment and almost be kind of overwhelmed by it, right? And overwhelmed emotionally by it.
Yeah.
And it can feel like your environment has a whole lot of control over you.
Yeah. The other side of this control fallacy is what you probably all believe already, thinking when you hear control fallacy. It's that you have control over things that you actually don't have control over.
Choleric.
Yeah. So it's thinking like, I can control this person or this situation, this thing.
I can get it done when you can't. Like, there's an element of control.
No, here's how I think I would actually coach somebody in that situation. Okay. Like, I think it's actually very helpful to understand the things that you can control and change. Like, so like, okay, let's create a list of things that we actually can control and change, and things that we can't. And what's really helpful for people is to realize that they cannot control and change other people. That's very helpful.
Or they cannot control time. That was one that was actually very helpful for me, because I often would have this, I can do it. I can get it done. I can get it done. And I would just add more and more and more on. And I can't control my own human limitations. Yeah, I could work out, I could eat well, and I can kind of do what I can to maintain a good quality of health. But there's always going to be a finite capacity that I have as a human being. And there's always going to be a finite amount of time that I'm dealing with too. And that used to be often a point of frustration that I would resist. And I would just keep taking on more and more and more. And ultimately, it was a very oftentimes a very painful humiliation that would reveal to me that it's way too much. Or Aaron would show up and be like, hey, remember you're a parent, right? And you got to come out of your office and I get it. You work at home, but it's not the same. Let's do this. So, yeah.
I remember realizing this and applying it to my own parenting. I mean, I can't control my child. Not being she's just out of control or whatever, but as we are understanding her development, she's developing her will. She's developing her thoughts right now. And my role as a parent is not to control her, because guess what? Kids hate that and they will always resist it. Not to control her, but to actually present to her good options. And hey, would you like this option, good option A, or this good option B, and give her that as a presentation. It was just really helpful to learn I can't control him, nor am I being an irresponsible parent by not controlling my child.
Yeah.
And the quicker she can learn how to utilize her will the right way, or the best way, the most moral way, I mean, that's kind of, you have to go to that place of surrendering that control. So I think that's actually really helpful to know that.
You can lead the child to broccoli, but you can't make him eat.
That's right. I actually started using broccoli to get her to eat her meat. I'm going to put this green thing on your plate.
I know. And the whole time I'm thinking, it
no.
was this is so not the right way to present broccoli. This is...
Matt, you can't control me. Whatever. I'm going to show up the way I am.
It's just okay.
Okay, so next one, blaming. Blaming is one of the ways of assigning responsibility to other people when things don't go our way. So we go, oh, this didn't work out. I know. I'll blame
your fault.
This person. I think we've all done that.
Yeah, it's very much like Adam and Eve in the garden. The woman, you put me here. It's yeah, the snake, you tricked me. So I ate it. Big whoop. It's just a very natural... I think you can see all these things as consequences of the fall. But yeah, this is really a natural tendency when we do something that we're ashamed of and we know, and it's an ordered shame. It's just that's convicts, not condemns. But it's just yeah, we kind of want to wish we were perfect already. And so
yeah,
I'd love to blame Erin for stuff.
Yeah. I mean,
especially when it's her fault for real.
I don't really see one particular temperament that this is just a bad habit for everyone.
Sure.
But who do you think it would be most? Probably the sanguine.
I honestly think that it's tough to... I think this is just so common that it's difficult. Maybe not phlegmatic. The phlegmatic may kind of be reluctant about blaming because they don't want to at least overtly blame somebody, maybe blaming somebody interiorly, but just not voicing it out because they don't want to rock the boat. But yeah, I think this is a really common to all.
I think melancholics would blame... They're very strong in blaming themselves. They're very scrupulous and they will blame
it might
themselves.
be how the blaming happens and to whom it's directed.
Yeah. I see how sanguines don't really... I don't really see them blaming other people necessarily, but blaming their circumstances. Cholerics maybe blaming people who didn't get the job done or worked as fast as them or did it their way or something. Maybe that's, I don't know. And then the melancholic is more so blaming themselves, but when they blame others, it's to the same standard that they hold themselves.
Yes, that resonates very clearly with me. That's been something I've even realized in my journaling when I've been even journaling, about another person. I'm blaming that other person. I'm being oh my gosh, there's a lot of this happening internally here as well. Or if we flip the table around, I could really see how the things that I'm blaming this person for, I could also be blamed for.
Yeah.
That's
a great way to...
So it's a flip-flop. It's a projection.
Yeah, how am I showing up this way?
Yeah, it's like gaslighting.
Yeah.
I'm not the one to blame. You're the one to blame.
Right.
Here's why.
But also, no, that's how you would self-coach yourself out of that, though. Is the very person that you're blaming for, can you actually show up? I don't know. How are you to blame as well? I think that's a good question to ask yourself.
He used perfect cast first stone.
Yes. This one's a good one. And we
Okay,
talked about
last
this.
one more.
Yep. Emotional reasoning. Basically, I feel this very strongly, therefore it's true.
A lot of this going on. That never happens. Never see it on the news. Never see it on the university campuses.
I will say this is
I
definitely
feel like this is really true.
This is definitely a result to modernism. This is like modernism, like one of the main pieces of that is that heresy is this extreme subjectivism. So it's just like, just because I feel this way, therefore it's true. And it just completely abdicates any reasoning.
You see, I think I can see your logic at that, but I also can see this being a response to some repression of emotions.
Yeah,
All right.
sure.
It's very interesting to see how empathy showed up in one of the most common top 5 responses on Clifton Strengths. Empathy is amongst millennials. It wasn't amongst previous generations. So this generation of millennials we're at kind of the top end of it, but tends to experience other person's emotional life, participate in somebody else's emotional life a little bit more habitually than others. I just find that to be kind of interesting. And so you see a lot of the arguments being very emotionally based on the college campus, especially around, I watch some of the shows where it's just like somebody's going to have an open debate on abortion, right? That's one of those, it's very hyper emotional.
Yeah, they will
or
appeal
they go
to the emotional.
even some like very, they'll use some of the, what are they called? The fringe arguments or the fringe circumstances of like rape to justify, in this case, emotion always being the case because of this really outlier circumstance over there, which, I have a friend that was conceived by the product of rape. And her response is always like, okay, wait, so my life isn't as valuable based on, or like I don't have the same rights based on the conception circumstances, which are outside of, that means that less. So it's like, okay, well, there's a whole emotional argument that's there too, but also a rational argument as well. But yeah, when we just are arguing from a place of emotion, and we can't, if like I'm very aware of it when I'm watching TV and somebody brings a very intellectual argument and they pose a question and the response is a non-answer, but one that's highly emotional. At that point, I go, okay, all right.
You got nothing.
I see what's going on here.
You got nothing.
All right, don't
you
fool
lost.
me. Don't
you lost.
fool me. But I tell you what, like in a hyper emotional society, especially one that is connecting the millennial generation that's very empathetic, I could see this being a really
it is.
smart tactic, knowing your audience in terms of your rhetoric that you use.
It's a legit tactic, but it's such a powerless place to make decisions from.
Oh,
like
yes.
because it's always moving. I mean, if you think about it, like your emotions are always vacillating back and forth. And so like, can you imagine making like a big life decision or a commitment? This is why so many of the millennials who are highly triggered and, all this stuff, like the overgeneralization again.
Big overgeneralization.
But still like.
We're there with you. I am more than earnest.
But this highly emotional way of being, this is why they're having such a hard time committing to relationships. Because they're like, what if I feel like I don't like this person tomorrow? It's like, well, no. Love is a choice of your will, and your intellect is what actually like
informs your will. Yeah.
And so it has to be a reasonable decision. It has to be a reasonable choice. Sorry, it's not sexy, but like that, it is really like you do want to ask these questions. Will this person be a good parent for a future child? Will this person go to the PTA meetings with me? Will this person go to mass with me? Like these are reasonable questions to ask. And so like this kind of letting your emotions decide. I remember coaching a couple of people who were significantly younger than me, not like a lot, but like by 10 or 10 plus years. And this always coming up. And like I had to do a lot of teaching on emotional work and a lot of teaching on what emotions are there for, and when we can actually, like, if we can trust our emotions, to make decisions or when we need to shelf them. I would say almost always you shelf them.
Well, when you say shelf them, it's not throw them away. It's like, okay, we need to get curious. We need to see, am I operating from really that place where it's kind of an irrational emotion, or is this something where it's like, okay, I am experiencing this emotion from a very clean, honest place that is actually, coming from a thought that's aligned with reality, and it's inclining me towards like, okay, we can trust those. I don't want to be, there's a prudent suspicion of our emotions because of what sin has done, right?
Yes.
It's wounded this nature to the point where sometimes we feel an emotion that's based on a cognitive distortion. It's a product of a cognitive distortion, meaning it's operating out of a place of fallacy or something that's not in
lack
line
of
with
reason.
Yeah, something that's not in line with reality. And so it's not to say, okay, that emotion is bad, but rather it's like, okay, what is the thought behind this? Can we subject that thought to reason? Does it pass the reason test? And then if we have one that passes the reason test, then we can trust that emotion a little bit more. But we also know this too from like that part of the reality of the fall is that there's like the enemy can move our emotions. The demonic can move our emotions. And so if there's something I remember reading, St. John of the Cross is kind of, he speaks a lot about sensationalism and how we want to make sure that we're not necessarily following, these
consolations.
These consolations that come in the very sensory type of experience because that is so easily mimicked by a demon posing as an angel of light. It's rather to these places that are very, very, very deep below the surface that the enemy can't quite touch, nor can he easily mimic. This is something I even drew from in my spiritual direction course over at Divine Mercy University. That's where spiritual direction is always seeking to arrive at that place, deep, 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 deep down, because that's where you find that, Elijah's still small voice. And it's a very sacred place where you're communing with God in your inner room, and you're closing the doors.
Yeah, I think what's interesting, if I could share, like, before we
wrap up here,
where I see this show up, emotional reasoning. We coach other coaches, other Catholic coaches. We train and we coach other Catholic coaches. And I really see people coming from a place, like there'll be like fear showed up. Like, let's say they have like a goal, like a professional goal or whatever. They want to like grow their coaching business. And they're like, but I'm afraid. And this is a really perfect example of saying, like, considering an emotion, but also looking at it. So like being like, okay, so why are you afraid? Let's not let fear be the driving force, or like let it make you not make the decision, right? Like, so like it's not in the driver's seat right now. We're just looking at the fear. It might just come along for the ride because you're doing something new, but like, what are you afraid of? And a lot of times it'll be like fear of the unknown. Okay, completely normal response, emotional response to something, doing something new, right? How about we don't let that mean that you need to stop what you're doing, and we just say, fear might come along, it might be here, because there's different species of fear, which we actually spoke about in another podcast. I don't remember which one that one was, but
I don't even remember that one.
We talked about all the different species of fear, and there's like some that are really kind of neutral, and then there's some that could actually go vicious pretty easily.
Yeah.
So that's where I think this emotional reasoning, like not just reacting out of emotion, but to actually consider what you're feeling, but also not stop what you're doing necessarily. Like, don't let it like be in the driver's seat. Pretty much. That's all I want to say.
I always love encouraging people to just get curious. That's the word. That's the C word. Curious about their emotions.
Curious, but not indulgent. So curious being like, what is this emotion telling me?
What does that mean?
But also indulgent being like, you're staying in it. Like our emotions are fuel for our actions. Like they actually fuel what we do or what we don't do. And so that is, this is Matt saying,
it's time to go. I know. I'm leaning over here.
You're
Let's
like,
go.
Okay,
Let's
great.
go.
Shut up.
Need a coffee break.
Yeah, me too.
All right. So, folks, thanks so much. Temperaments. We've got our quiz. Go take it. You can find it at metanoia.catholic on Instagram. All right. You can go to our little link tree there, and you can start that Temperaments quiz. It is free, and if you want to get that report, couple bucks, not too much, right? Just covers our costs and gives us the ability to continue to further the work that we're doing here at Metanoia Catholic. So take that, give it to your friends, give it to your spouse, give it to your boyfriend, your girlfriend, your kids. It's a really great test, a place to, like Aaron said in the beginning, great. It's great to, when you're on this journey, to get a little bit of a indication of where you are right now.
You are here.
You are here.
So that's it.
All right.
All right, guys. Stop being cognitively distorted. Hopefully we fixed it all. Fixed the whole
Bye.
world.
In a podcast. That might be a little extreme. See you guys.